Hello, all. A wonderful morning to all the participants present here. I welcome all of you to part 3 of this training series for Manage Engine Mobile Device Manager Plus. On my screen, you can see the Endpoint Management Solutions portfolio, and these are the list of products offered under the Endpoint Management section by Manage Engine. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into the various features offered by our Mobile Device Manager Plus product in this training series. I welcome all of you to this training series. My name is Karthik Bharadwaj Jaikumar, and I'm a product specialist in Mobile Device Manager Plus. Today, I will be helping you understand the product and its various features. This training is split into 3 modules. The first and the second modules on device onboarding and provisioning are completed. The app management and device security module is completed as well. The third module will be conducted today and will focus mainly on modern management of Windows 10 and Mac devices. All the participants are encouraged to go through all the 3 modules to get a complete overview of the product, while also simultaneously exploring the features explained in the training during each module. All of these sessions are recorded and will be sent to the registered participants over email once the webinar is completed. These training sessions can also be accessed in the below mentioned URL. To avoid any confusion about the product or my explanations, I would like to mention that I'll be using the terms Mobile Device Manager Plus and MDMP, which is an abbreviation, interchangeably across the duration of this webinar. So let's take a quick look at the training agenda for today. First, we will start off with a brief overview of Mobile Device Manager Plus, a general introduction about the product, followed by the architecture, the ports required for your devices for smooth functioning, and how exactly MDMP manages these devices. For the audience who already attended the first and the second sessions, this will just be a quick recap. Next, we will be looking at automated enrollment of Windows and Mac devices using Azure Autopilot enrollment and ABM enrollment respectively. After this, we will deploy certain basic corporate configurations to the devices and discuss additional security settings. We will also be discussing silent app installation and secure content distribution to the user devices. Post this, I'll be bringing up a few common scenarios and use cases which will make it easier for you to implement this product in your organization. Any questions that you have during the session or during the presentation, I would request you to type it in the chat box. Today we have with us an expert panel who will be able to answer all your queries. Just to clear the doubt, the chat box is the same as a Q&A box that you can see, and you can type in all your queries there. Now, starting off with a brief overview of Mobile Device Manager Plus. The first point to be addressed: which operating systems are supported on MDMP? As you can see here, these are a list of operating systems that can be managed. You can manage Apple, Android, Windows, and Chromebooks. When it comes to the device type, it can be a smartphone, a laptop, a tablet, a TV, or others. Now, Mobile Device Manager Plus is available in the form of 3 solutions. The first is as an integrated suite with Desktop Central, which has now been rebranded as Endpoint Central. Desktop Central or Endpoint Central is a unified endpoint management tool that can be used to manage laptops, desktops, servers, and other endpoints. The second is a standalone MDM for users that want to manage essentially mobile devices only. This is for the audience that would like to majorly manage mobile devices like mobiles, phones, tablets, etc. And if you need the standalone MDM as a solution. The third is for the MSP audience who wish to support clients from multiple companies. For this, we support something known as the multi-tenant architecture. So Mobile Device Manager Plus is also available as an MSP offering. Now, I'd like to mention here that all of these offerings are available both as an on-cloud or an on-premise offering based on the user requirements. Next slide. So we understand that many customers need to use our solution in collaboration with other functions. And to enable that, we also support integrations with other applications to ensure easy workflow management for the admin as well as the user. We can integrate MDMP with our own ticketing software, Manage Engine Service Desk or Manage Engine Service Desk Plus, and other ticketing software solutions like Spicework, Jira Service Desk, Zendesk Support, and ServiceNow. You can also integrate MDMP with Zoho CRM and Zoho Creator applications. Other applications can also be integrated by using the public API key, which is available on the below mentioned URL to perform seamless integrations. The URL is www.manageengine.com/MDM-API. Now let's quickly look at the MDM architecture. The Mobile Device Manager Plus architecture involves three major components. The first is the MDM server. The second, the notification services. And the third, the endpoints or the managed devices. Understand the architecture. Let's take the example of, let's say, an admin. And as an admin, you want to install a particular application remotely on one of the devices or the user devices. In this case, you will initiate a command from the MDM console, which will be sent from the MDM server to the notification service. The notification service will use the devices or the user's unique ID or serial number to wake the device up. After this, the device will contact the MDM server and communicate with the MDM about the required app. While opting for the on-premise model, you need to ensure that the MDM server is accessible to the mobile device at all points of time. Also, in case you do not want to directly expose your MDM server's public IP and other information, you can integrate a component called the Secure Gateway, which will redirect all communication to the MDM server from the internet. This is an additional layer of security that we would recommend to add on the on-premise edition so that your server's IP and other confidential settings are not exposed to the internet directly. For the cloud version, however, the server is already available in the data center that we provide along with all security measures. So you just need to ensure that this user device is available over the internet always for the MDM server. Moving on, these are the list of ports used by Mobile Device Manager Plus. For the device to MDMP server, you need to have the 9383 port. For the MDMP server to notification services, you will need the 443 port. And for the devices to the notification services, you have different ports depending on which device you're using. For further information on ports, you can visit this URL www.manageengine.com/MDM-ports. So how does MDM actually manage devices? Does it need any component to be installed on the devices or does it just do it remotely? So as you can see here in this graphic, for Android devices, the user needs to have the MDMP app installed. This app, of course, is available on the Play Store as well, but also can be distributed through a URL from our interface. For Apple, Windows, and Chrome OS devices, you do have the option of an app, but you do not necessarily need to have it. An OS client or an operating system client is provided to leverage the MDM profile, and this profile needs to be installed on the devices to effectively manage these devices. You can manage all your devices on MDM using a single unified interface that we'll talk about elaborately during the session. But the first step to managing these devices from MDM is adding them. And as you already know, this is also known as enrollment or onboarding of these devices. So MDM offers various enrollment methods depending on the device type. And this has been discussed in the first week of the training series. So let's move on to one of the automated enrollment methods that we are going to focus on today, which is the Windows Autopilot enrollment. to enroll your Windows devices. The process to enroll devices using Windows Autopilot enrollment is shown here. As the first step, the MDM server needs to be integrated with Azure AD. Once this is done, the devices are added to the Windows Business Store portal. Once these devices are registered and activated, the devices will then get registered with MDM as well. And you can distribute and activate these devices, and these can be distributed to the users. So these are a few prerequisites that are required for you to use Azure Autopilot enrollment. The first is you will need to have a third-party certificate added to the MDM server. The second, you will also need an Azure administrator account in order to link and use Azure AD with the MDM server. And third, you will also need to purchase adequate Azure licenses as per the number of devices being used and enrolled and assigned. This can be changed from time to time and varies according to the user's requirements. Now let's look at what this process looks like on the MDM interface. So this is a screenshot of the MDM interface that I've attached here. First, from the MDMP home, navigate to the enrollment tab. Under the Windows 10 tab, click on Azure Enrollment. Here, you can see the steps as discussed to enroll the device using this method. Once you've uploaded a third-party certificate and assigned adequate user licenses, you can start configuring something known as the app template in the Azure portal. But this integration varies for the cloud and the on-premise editions of the MDM. So let's discuss this in depth. First, we will look at this integration with the on-premise edition and then move on to the cloud edition. So this is what the Azure portal looks like once you sign in. So once you sign into your Azure portal, which is the link which is mentioned on the MDMP portal, next, navigate to Azure Active Directory and under Mobility, MDM and MAM, click on Add Application. Search for the on-premise MDM application in the search bar. Select the application and then click on Add. The on-premise MDM application has now been added to the Azure portal. The next step is configuring the app template. For this step, yet again, navigate to the Azure Active Directory. And under Mobility, MDM and MAM, you will see that your app is now listed. Click on the app which is on-premise MDM application. And first, we start by defining something known as the MDM user scope. This depends on your requirements. You can select these options based on how many users you want to assign, etc. Select some if you only want to enroll specific groups. For this case, I'm selecting all. For the MDM terms of use URL and the MDM discovery URL, we need to navigate to the MDM interface. Let me quickly show you how that looks. So this is an MDM interface that I've taken. Under Enrollment, navigate to Azure Enrollment Autopilot. As you can see here, this is the link to download the MDM terms of use URL and the MDM discovery URL. The app ID URI will be required later on. So for now, you need to download the first two links. Once this is done, navigate back to the Azure portal and upload these here. Then click on on-premises MDM application settings. And then navigate to the Expose an API tab. Next, navigate back to the MDM interface. And here, copy the app ID URI. Once you copy this, paste this URI under the application ID URI. Once these steps are done, click on Configure. and save this configuration. We have now completed the integration for the on-premises MDM server successfully. Let's now see how we can configure the same for MDM Cloud. First, yet again, we need to sign into the Azure portal. Once this is done, under the Azure dashboard, navigate to Azure Active Directory and under Mobility MDM and NAM, click on Add Application. Next, in the search bar, search for Manage Engine MDM. Select the application and click on Add. The application has now been added. Now navigate back to the Azure Active Directory. And yet again, under Mobility MDM and MAM, you can see that the added application has been listed here. Click on the added application. And just like before, you need to copy and paste the MDM terms of use URL and the MDM discovery URL after you select the MDM user scope. Now, as you can see, the cloud integration does not require the app ID URI that we pasted in the previous on-premises integration. So here, just click on Save and save this configuration. With this, we have completed the integration of Azure AD with MDM on-premise and MDM Cloud. Next, and the most vital step is adding these devices to the Azure portal. To add devices, first log into Microsoft Suite for Business with your admin account. Once this is done, this is what the Microsoft Store for Business will look like. Click on the Manage tab and then click on Devices. First, we need to create an autopilot deployment profile. This will help us configure the device activation settings and reduce the admin and user intervention while activating the device. Now click on Autopilot Deployment and click on Create a New Profile. Specify a name for this profile for identification. Here, I've named the profile Manage Engine MDM profile. As you can see, a few autopilot deployment default features are skipped automatically. If you want to skip privacy settings, local admin account creation, and end user license agreement, you can toggle these on to skip these as well. If you want to distribute the devices to contract employees and you do not want them to create a local admin account on these devices, you can disable this by toggling the on button and skipping it. Once these options have been configured, click on Create. Now that we've created an autopilot deployment profile, we need to add our devices to the Azure portal. So you can upload a CSV file that you got from your device reseller or a vendor in the Microsoft Store for Business. You can do that by navigating to the Devices tab under Manage, and you can add devices. Once that is done, we will now create an autopilot deployment group. Under this group, various devices can be added. So you need to specify a name for the group. Here, I specified the name as Manage Engine MDM. Click on Add. Once that is done, click on Refresh My List. The devices added from the CSV file will be reflected here. My list only had one device, the Surface Pro 4, and that is reflected here. So the next step is assigning the autopilot enrollment profile to the devices. So here, you need to select the devices. So in this case, I'm selecting the Surface Pro 4 and then click on Autopilot Deployment Profile. Here, select the profile you had created, that is the Manage Engine MDM profile in this case. And now, as you can see, the profile has been applied to the device. The next step is assigning users to these devices. And for this, MDM has split user assignment so that you can assign users in bulk while distributing them. You can also add users or assign users as and when required from the MDM console itself. This is the end of Azure Autopilot enrollment. So now let's move on to enrolling Max using Apple Business Manager. Before I move on, I would like to repeat that if you have any doubts in this process or any questions with respect to this session, please do mention it in the chat box. We have an expert panel with us today who would love to answer your questions. Moving on. Just like autopilot enrollment, we will begin with integrating the ABM portal with the MDM server. Once the customer details are added to the ABM portal, all the devices purchased from the resellers or vendors can be added and mapped to the portal. We can either activate the devices and then distribute them to the employees, or let the users activate the devices themselves. Once activated, the devices will be registered with MDM, and then these devices can be managed remotely from the MDM portal. Please note that this integration is a one-time process, and this does not have to be repeated for each device. Once this integration is performed for one device, it need not be performed for all devices linked specifically to the same customer details. So as you can also see, if you've attended the previous sessions, these steps are similar to enrolling iOS devices using ABM or Apple Business Manager. And since this was covered in the first webinar session, I would request you to go back, and in case you have any doubts with respect to the same, please do drop a text in the chat box and our team will connect with you whenever you are available for a personalized training session. Now, once ABM enrollment is done, this is what will differ from the iOS devices to the Mac devices. This is what the screen on the MDM portal will look like. Here, you can configure if the device is to be activated by the user or the admin. You can also configure which configuration steps need to be skipped while the device gets activated. This can be done by selecting the Mac tab and choosing which options need to be configured by the user when the device is being activated. For example, you can skip firewall, iCloud diagnostics, iCloud storage, Apple registration, etc. You can also choose to automatically create an admin account during device activation. So if you click and check to automatically create an admin account, you need to fill in these credentials. And once this is done, click on save and the configurations are applied. So now that we've finished looking at enrolling and activating devices, the next step is deploying configurations to these devices. In today's session, first, we'll be looking at applying basic settings such as Wi-Fi, VPN on the devices and security hardening by applying various restrictions on the devices and also deploying kiosk mode or locking down the devices to a single app or a set of apps. So for this, it's better if I navigate to the MDM console and give you a live demonstration. So on the MDM console, first navigate to the device management tab. Let's first create a Windows profile to apply the required restrictions. Under the Profiles tab, click on Create Profile and select Windows. You can change the profile name as required. I'll be changing it here to Windows. Click on Continue. So now this is what a typical profile would look like. And all of these are the restrictions that you can configure and apply to various Windows devices. The passcode tab. This tab allows the admin to configure the passcode type, the passcode length, the content, the strength, and other variables as required. You can also configure something known as the maximum number of failed attempts and pin settings, where an insecure pin can be blocked and the pin complexity can be decided. Next, the Wi-Fi tab. Under the Wi-Fi tab, you can configure the devices to automatically connect to a secure Wi-Fi. And you can also configure if they have to connect to this Wi-Fi or not. You can select the security type. You can input the password. And you can also have a proxy settings under the Wi-Fi settings. Also, in case you want all the user communication over the network to be routed via a secure VPN for security and data privacy reasons, this can be done under the VPN tab. You can choose a VPN type from the list. Also, if your desired VPN is not present on this list, then you can click on Learn how to configure other third-party VPN connection types. Other VPN settings can also be configured, such as the server name, IP address, user authentication, and you can also have a proxy settings here. There is another setting known as a per app VPN. If you check this, then you can configure the VPN to be app specific to ensure that only certain apps connect to the VPN automatically when open. For example, if I want this only for the Zoho Click app, or I can just search for the app here and add it. You can also configure Exchange Active Sync. And based on if the Exchange server is on premises or cloud, you can configure different settings. Now you may be wondering, since Exchange is user-based, do I have to enter user details individually every time? So for this, MDM supports dynamically populating user details from the AD using the user principal name attribute or the UPN attribute. For this, under UPN, under username, you need to input this piece of code or %UPN %, where UPN stands for user principal name. This is an attribute where this will fetch the username map to the device. MDM also allows you to distribute both user and client certificates. To distribute user certificates, click on the Certificate tab. You can either choose a certificate that is already added, or you can add a new certificate by clicking on Add Certificate. Once you save and publish this profile, it can then be distributed to devices, and this certificate is then distributed to all devices for which the profile has been applied. To manage client certificates, navigate to SCEP tab. Let me go back to the profile. Let me now navigate to the SCEP tab. So you first need to create a SCEP or a you first need to create a SCEP template or a DigiCert authority. Once the integration process is complete, you need to create a SCEP template based on which authority will distribute client certificates to your devices. You can either select a template that has already been added, or you can add a new template. If you click on Add a new template, you can fill in all of these details and click on Save to add this template. Once this is done, you can click on Save and publish the profile to various devices. MDM also lets you create custom configurations that are not supported by default in Mobile Device Manager Plus. This will help organizations migrate your Windows devices from legacy management using GPO to modern management using MDM. To create your custom configuration, use the information provided by your configuration service provider and obtain the details mentioned here, which are OMA URI, the operation, the data type, value, and others. You can also add multiple configurations in the same profile, but it is only recommended to create custom configurations for policies that MDM currently does not offer. And once this is done, you can click on Save and publish the profile. Next, for security hardening of devices, various restrictions can be applied. For example, navigate to Restrictions. Under here, you can enforce device encryption, disable external storage devices, enable or disable camera, enable, that is, allow or restrict screen capture, and others. Now, all of us know that one of the main sources of malware is unauthorized applications. So it is recommended to restrict installing such applications by disabling the installation of non-store apps. Under Applications, you can allow, deny, or allow user control for installing non-store apps. You can also set up a kiosk profile where only a single app or a set of apps can be accessed by the user. Depending on which setting you choose for the single app or the multi-app interface, you can also specify the app name or the bundle identifier to uniquely identify the app and add it to the devices. In case of multi-app kiosk mode, you can specify the app names or bundle identifiers for modern apps, or you can provide the desktop path for desktop apps as well. Once this is done, you can save and publish the profile to all the devices. Moving back to the presentation screen. So this is a quick look at what a multi-app kiosk mode will look like in Windows devices. No settings or other applications can be accessed by the user, and these are the only set of applications that have been distributed by the admin to the user. Next, on Mac machines, let's look at applying a similar basic settings such as Wi-Fi, VPN on the devices, security hardening by applying various restrictions, and also some proactive policies to secure data on Mac devices. So navigating back to the MDMP console, under the device management tab in profiles, let's now create a Mac OS profile for our use cases. Let me name this Mac May 2022. Also give a brief description for this profile if needed. Click on continue. Just like the Windows profile, you can configure Wi-Fi, VPN, and you have a separate setting for per app VPN and other basic configurations. You can also restrict users from sharing sensitive data by disabling screenshots and screen recording. You can also improve security by restricting iTunes file sharing, etc. And also disabling biometric methods such as Face ID and Touch ID. If the same device is being used by multiple users, you can also prevent the passwords from being autofilled in the browser. You can restrict sharing and requesting passwords from devices in proximity by configuring the gatekeeper to allow downloads from only specific services. Please do explore all the restrictions which are available here. Now that we've taken a quick look at that, now we'll be looking at system extensions. Some softwares like antivirus, VPN, etc. require access to your hardware for which users need to approve installing system or kernel extensions on the devices. You can approve these extensions by using the system extensions profile. So you can also approve if the users can approve kernel or system extensions manually by giving a yes or no here. Mention the team identifier of the vendor that you're going to use for the extensions. And to approve specific extensions developed by a vendor, specify the unique bundle identifier. If this field is left empty, all extensions with the specified team identifier will be allowed listed. You can also configure the type of extensions which can be allowed from that particular vendor. Click on Save and publish the profile. Now let's move on to Privacy Preference Policy Control. It's present here. Privacy Preference Policy Control or PPPC. All the apps installed in your devices require certain permissions. Using this policy, you can pre-approve certain permissions that are required by the apps from the users. To allow the permissions, you need to specify the details of the app like the bundle identifier or the installation path and the code sign requirement. Then select the permission that this app needs to have access to. Some apps may also require permissions to other apps or services. You can individually specify those under Apple events. You can enter the bundle identifier for that specific app and the code requirement of the app that the main app has access to. Once this is done, save and publish the profile. Moving back to the presentation, we've seen the basic configurations, security hardening restrictions, and proactive security policies that can be applied to Mac and Windows devices. Now, what if someone steals your Mac OS laptop? Or what will you do then if someone tries to break into your or your user's Mac OS laptop and tries to access the corporate data in it? So let me explain on the profile page. So using the profile we'd already created, which is MacMate 2022 test, you need to configure something known as file vault encryption. File vault encryption is supported for all Mac devices running Mac OS 10.13 or above. This encrypts the data on the Mac and ensures that you can only recover the data using a personal recovery key or an institutional recovery key or both. You can click on the button here for the steps to create an institutional recovery key and to distribute the devices. So what is the advantage of configuring file vault encryption through an MDM instead of directly through a Mac? So, well, in case the user forgets the recovery key, then this can be displayed by the admin on the device screen so that the user can much more easily and remotely recover the device by clicking on this setting. You can then save this and publish this. But while file vault encryption is a setting that is applied to data stored inside the device, what if someone uses an external device to gain access to the data after stealing your laptop? So for this, we have another setting known as the firmware password. So navigating to firmware password, the firmware password, also known as recovery lock, can be configured on the MDM profile. So you can ensure that only after entering the firmware password that is entered and confirmed here, users will be able to access the device when it is booted from an internal or external storage device instead of the default startup. I would like to mention one important point here, which many users tend to forego. So once, let's say this password is 123456, the same for the confirm password. So if you click on save, this profile is now saved as a recovery lock or a firmware password profile. Please note here that all of the other restrictions cannot be changed now and cannot be applied as well. This is because for both the file vault encryption and firmware password, we need to create standalone profiles. This basically means that profiles in which any of these settings are configured and saved and published, other profile restrictions cannot be applied, and a new profile has to be created for other restrictions. Now that this is clear, you can publish this profile and distribute it to various Mac devices. So now let's move back to the presentation. Let's quickly look at managing apps and content using MDM on both Windows and Apple devices. So for Mac devices, let's start off with Apple Business Manager. Before we start off with the workflow, let me quickly explain silent installation. So in many scenarios, the admin may want to distribute certain apps for devices as an organization policy, such as an antivirus, a VPN, etc. And these apps may be installed from time to time on the devices and has to be done instantaneously and immediately without any user intervention. So this can be done by silent app installation, which does not involve the user intervention, and the apps are installed directly on the user devices. So the first step for app installation is the integration of the ABM portal with the MDM server. Once this is done, apps can be approved on the ABM portal, and these apps are then reflected on the MDM server and can be silently installed on the devices. The process is same for iOS and macOS devices. And once apps are approved, you can navigate to the app repository tab in the MDM portal, click on Apple App Management, and silently distribute apps to users. So let me quickly show you how. So navigate to device management, app repository, and let's first filter out the apps that are supported on Apple devices. Please give me a moment while my page loads. So click on filter, app type, Apple, and all. Now we've got a list of all the apps that are supported on Apple devices. So to add these apps to the device, you cannot add them directly from here. So for that, you need to navigate to groups and devices. Here, you can either distribute the apps to specific groups or specific devices. In this case, let me try to add the app to a particular device. So click on devices. Now you can choose the devices that you want to distribute the app to. So click on apps. You can update the apps, remove apps, or for certain apps, you can click it and add it. You can also choose to notify the user upon distributing the apps. Now let's move back to the presentation. Managing modern Windows applications using MDM. So in order to silently install these applications, that is modern Windows applications using MDM, there is a prerequisite. That is, you need to have an Azure Administrator account. So now with your created Azure Administrator account, you can integrate the window. You need to integrate the Windows Business Store with Mobile Device Manager Plus. So under the Device Management tab, navigate to App Repository, go to Windows Business Store, and under Business Store integration, agree to the provider's terms of use and privacy policy after reading it, and then click on Login Now. Log in with your Azure admin account credentials and accept the permissions requested by MDM for the integration. Click on Accept. Once allowed, the integration process is now completed. The next step is activating the Mobile Device Manager Plus app on the Windows Business Store. This is so that Windows Business Store allows the ME-MDM app to manage and silently install other apps on your devices. To do that, click on Next. And the ME-MDM app is now successfully verified. After this, your MDM server will start syncing with your Business Store portal. All the apps purchased on the Business Store will be synced and added to the MDM app repository. To add more apps, click on Purchase App from Store. This can be seen better on the Microsoft Store for Business. So you can either shop for My Group or you can directly search here. So in this case, let's add the Zoho Vault app. So search for the Zoho Vault app. Next, once the app pops up, click on the app. Then click on Get the app and you will get a confirmation message that the app has been purchased and that it has been added to your inventory. The ME-MDM server will automatically sync the app list with the Windows Business Store every 24 hours. If you want to sync the apps immediately, you can do so by clicking on Sync under the Windows Business Store in App Repository, and the apps are synced immediately and ready for distribution. Now, let's look at silently installing enterprise applications on your Windows devices. So let me show you on the Windows console. The app repository, click on Add App. Here, select the Windows Enterprise app. As you can see, multiple file formats are supported for uploading the enterprise app file. Once you upload a specific file, MDM also automatically checks if all the files required to run the app have been uploaded. Once done, the add is then added to the app repository and it can be silently installed on the devices. Moving back to the presentation, let's look at how you can securely distribute corporate content using MDM. Just like the app repository, MDM also offers a content repository to distribute content. For this, click on the Content Management tab. on the MDM interface. Under device management, navigate to content management. And as you can see here, you can view a list of uploaded files that can be distributed to devices. To upload a new file, click on add. And as you can see, MDM supports various file formats for content distribution. Select the file here and click on upload. Once uploaded, as you can see here, this file is a corrupt file. So MDM automatically scans for corrupted files and does not upload them. So once this is done, you can click on done. And the respective file is added to the MDM content repository. You can also configure the content management policies on the MDM console for specific files. So these policies are applied to the files distributed and decide how files can be opened on a user device using the third-party or MDM app and other settings for device privacy. For example, you can name the policy as required, and you can decide if the content should be opened with the MDM app only or third-party applications. You can also restrict or allow other settings such as clipboard sharing, screenshots, etc. You can also configure the download settings if the file has to be downloaded automatically or manually. Now, before we click on save, I'd like to mention a feature here which is open content with the ME-MDM app, which is selected by default. This is done because the ME-MDM app is a secure app which is installed on the device through which the admin can control all the settings on the device. So the ME-MDM app supports various file formats as a native, and you do not need a third-party app in many situations. And this is done so that your organization can support content confidentiality and data privacy for all users and the organization. So even if a certain file type is not supported, you can click on a third-party app and then distribute the app through the app repository so that the user can use it. Click on save, and this policy can then be applied to various other content. Moving on to the presentation. Let's look at how this content will appear on a user device. So first, the user will find a list of all the files that are distributed to that device by the admin. So as you can see here, these are a list of available files, and these are a list of already downloaded files by the user. Next, under the downloaded tab, you can find a list of the files which are already downloaded by the user from the catalog. The files are also split into different types such as PDFs, images, and spreadsheets, etc. so that this improves user accessibility. You can also see the recently opened files in the Recents tab. So let me give you an example of what a document that is opened by the ME-MDM app for the user using the ME-MDMP native viewer will look like. So as mentioned before, since many organizations do not trust third-party apps for viewing sensitive content and data, multiple file formats such as PDF, JPEG, and many others can be opened and viewed within the ME-MDMP app itself. This is done for better corporate data security and confidentiality. So this is what an app will look like. This is a PDF view of a document which has been distributed. Moving on, the Categories tab. Under the Categories tab, the documents are ordered according to the tags specified by the admin. So as you can see here, I have 3 tags which are docs, HIPAA, and tender. We have now come to an end of the modern management of Windows and Mac devices. So let's look at a few use cases and scenarios that arise while using MDM. First, scenario number 1. We use Active Directory in our organizations to manage users. Is it possible to remotely add the Macs enrolled in MDM to our organization's AD? Adding Macs to an AD can be tedious for the admin since the admin has to manually bind each Mac machine with the Active Directory. But with MDM, you can add all the Mac machines using a profile configuration, and this is known as AD asset binding. So as we created a profile for Mac devices previously, similarly create a profile for AD asset binding. Navigate to the AD asset binding tab under the profile. So you can select various settings such as your Active Directory domain and fill in the OU or the organization unit path. You can also configure the device access settings, which is access type, which means that the users can log in to their Mac machines if or if not they are connected to the organizational secure network. If you choose mobile, then the AD credentials are synced on the device and it can be accessed even when not in the organizational network or even when the device is offline. So specified AD groups can also be used and given admin privileges here. So this is known as AD asset binding, and this makes the work for an admin much more easier with respect to binding a Mac to the AD. Next, can we share contacts and calendar events to employees' iOS devices? So for sharing contacts and calendar events or syncing these, we have something known as, or let me just show you on the interface, on the profiles. Let's create a new iOS profile. Let's call this cal contact. And now you have a feature which is known as contact sync. So under contact sync, you can sync all the vital contacts on the managed device using your card app details. And you can also have a default account display name, the host name, the port, and other settings. You can also choose to use SSL for mail communication. And once you input the account username and account password, you can click on save and publish the profile. This is for contact sync. Similarly, for calendar sync, you can input the similar settings, click on save and publish the profile. Moving on, how can we secure all the network communication in the managed devices? This is very important for various reasons, the two of which that I have mentioned continuously throughout the session, which is the organizational security, data privacy, and confidentiality, not just for the user, but for the organization as well. So in order to secure all the network communications in the managed devices, you can configure a global HTTP proxy as mentioned here. So under global HTTP proxy, please ensure that the MDM server as mentioned here should be able to reach the proxy at all points of time in order to manage the mobile devices. So here you can configure the proxy to be manual or automatic. If it is automatic, you can just mention the name of the server URL. If it is manual, you need to mention the additional settings. Click on save and publish this profile to the required devices. So this way you can secure all communication that goes through in the user devices in the network. So does MDM on-premise offer options to prevent data loss due to server downtime? Server downtime is a major problem, and just because a server is facing some kind of downtime, there shouldn't be any data loss or any problems that is faced by the users or the admin. For this, MDM on-premise offers something known as a failover server. So under the admin tab on the mobile device manager plus interface, under setting up MDMP, navigate to failover server. Here, as you can see, my failover server trial has expired and you need to purchase a license. Once you purchase the license, you can add a failover server, you can configure it, and you can activate it. Once it has been activated, in case the primary server isn't working, the failover server will take over and the server downtime will be compensated for. Next, can we decide the data that is fetched and displayed by MDM for management? Can the same be informed to our users? This can also be done. For this, under the admin tab yet again, navigate to device privacy. Under device privacy, you have certain settings for employee-owned devices and certain settings for corporate devices as well. Click on modify. And here, except for a few compulsory inputs such as the IMEI or the serial number, the admin can modify what details need to be connected from the user. And you also have settings such as collect and display, which means that the user can also see that these specific settings or user details are being collected. Once this is done, You also have a few remote commands which can be executed on the devices. And you can choose to display the privacy policy to the user and whether these policies are applicable to employee owned or BYOD devices or corporate owned devices. Once this is done, click on save and these settings are then saved. What are the options available to secure MDM on-premise server from unauthorized access? So navigating back to the admin tab, you have a few settings to configure which you can do, a few of which are the user administration. So under user administration, you can add various users such as a technician or an admin user or a super admin in order to access the mobile device manager plus portal. Here, you can configure the roles, for example, an administrator, app management, auditor, etc. And this shows the various descriptions and what access they have with respect to mobile device manager plus. Apart from this, the most important point is you have something known as secure authentication. Under secure authentication, you can choose to configure a two-factor authentication, which if enabled, will require a two-factor authentication from the user or the admin every time they're logging in. And you can also set a time for which the browser will remember the OTP. Apart from this, you can also configure a passcode policy for all the users who are able to access mobile device manager plus servers. Moving on. How do I secure PII when it's downloaded or exported as reports? So moving back, under admin tab, you need to navigate to export settings under security settings. So PII is personally identifiable information. So any information which can uniquely identify the user or their details is known as PII. You can choose to mask or remove the PII or display the PII or leave it to the user's preference every time the PII is exported. So click on modify. So securing data exported from the MDM server, you can choose all these settings. As well as for securing data shared using scheduled report, you can choose the same. Once this is done, you can click on save. And for customizing the export details, you can click on this, which will redirect you to a help document. How can I notify my employees about scheduled maintenance or emergencies in bulk? So scheduled maintenance or emergencies in bulk is a new feature that we've introduced into our mobile device manager plus interface. This feature is known as announcements. Let me quickly show you how this feature works. Navigate to the device management tab, and under device management, under tools, navigate to announcements. Here, you can create, distribute, or delete a custom announcement. Let's create a mock announcement quickly. Let's title it as webinar. Let's say my message is, hi. Thank you. You can also have a user acknowledgement button, which means that the user has to click the button to confirm that they've read the announcement. This can be done for sensitive announcements. And you can also have different display icons for the announcements as required. Once this is done, you can click on preview. So this is what the announcement will look like on a mock device or on the user device. So you can click on save. And once this is saved, you can select that specific announcement, which is webinar today, and you can distribute it to the devices or groups as and when required. So let me click on distribute. There, successfully distributed the announcement webinar to the selective devices or groups. So now that we've come to an end of with respect to the session and the presentation, I hope you enjoyed the session and you got all your doubts clear from the session. In case you do have any doubts yet, we still have our expert panel on hold for all of your questions. So do mention in the chat or the Q&A box. So I would also request you to rate us on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is the best, hoping you like the presentation. And also, if you are available on different social media channels such as Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google Plus, you can use the hashtag Mobile Device Manager Plus and hashtag Manage Engine, and you can spread a word about us. So thank you again for attending this session. And this is the last slide, which is the endpoint management solution portfolio. In case you're looking for something more specific, we would also encourage you to navigate to www.manageengine.com/EMS to look at our entire portfolio of offerings. Thank you.